Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is a talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're about to do a MacJury session that might be the most requested MacJury session I've ever had. I had more individuals, more of you email me, contact me on Twitter, contact me on Facebook, and say, you really got to do a MacJury on this. So here we are. So we're going to talk about CrashPlan's decision to exit the consumer market. That seems to be what you all want to hear about, and so we'll go from there. And we have a great panel to do it with, too. So I'm going to just go around. We'll introduce everyone, and then we'll get to it. First up is the Green Rage Monster himself, Mr. Joe Kissell. Joe, welcome. It's good to have you.
Hello.
That's it, Joe?
I'm saving up my words for later. I have enough to say.
Okay. All right. I guess I'm not sure if this is his first time or second time on MacVoices, Mr. Frederick Van Johnson. Frederick, welcome.
Thank you. I think this is my second time chatting with you. Chuck, you've been on my show once, but yeah, I think this may be my first time actually participating in a MacJury panel. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I'm thinking because we presented on a panel at NAB, and I think that's where I'm confusing things.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And as a nice little segue, that particular panel was hosted by Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark, welcome back.
Thank you, Chuck. Hello to all of our listeners. Hello, Joe. Hello, Frederick.
Hey.
Mark.
All right, guys. The internet, especially the Mac space on the internet, has been really buzzing about this. I can't speak for the PC side. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The CrashPlan has decided to leave the individual market, I guess, the family market, deciding to focus on enterprise. And I'm really curious as to why did this punch everybody's button, other than the fact that it just seems that a lot of people were relying on CrashPlan's backup. Joe, I'm going to start with you. You wrote an article for Tidbits where you got some frustrations out. And so I will kind of let you go and maybe summarize things, and maybe you can summarize the frustrations.
Yeah, I did get some frustrations out. Since I wrote the article, I've learned new things, and now I realize I have to update it with additional frustrations. And it wasn't just me. I wrote the article, and then we've had, at last count, I think we're going on like 150 comments, which for a Tidbits article is huge. So and then of course, on Twitter and every place else, people are getting up in arms. And I've had so many people email me about this. And they're like, Joe, I read your backups book. Did you know about this? Or Joe, I read this. Did you read? Like, yes, I know about it. Read the article. I'm really unhappy. You're making me unhappier because I just get so worked up about this. So what I did in my article was I started out by saying I'm really unhappy. I used a little more colorful language, namely the color green. And then I said, okay, so let's start with the facts. The facts are, CrashPlan is discontinuing their consumer product, CrashPlan for Home. They're discontinuing it in 14 months, though. It's not happening immediately. So they're discontinuing it in 14 months. They're giving all of their existing subscribers an extra 2 months on their subscription. They are not offering refunds, even if you purchased a subscription last week. They are giving people a discount for the first year if you switch over to their small business plan. But after that first year, the plan costs about twice as much as the individual plan, or even more if you had the family plan. They're also offering a discount on Carbonite subscriptions if you want to switch to Carbonite, although that's also a bit of a sore spot for reasons we can get into later. So a lot of people are saying, well, first of all, the thing about cloud backups is it can take days, weeks, in some cases months to back up all your data to the cloud. So it's kind of a big commitment. It's kind of overwhelm your bandwidth. And if you have a bandwidth cap on your internet connection, that's a big deal. So once people have gotten to the point that finally my 2 terabytes of data has uploaded to the cloud, to be told now, sorry, you're going to have to just start over again with another provider, that is one source of unhappiness. the fact that there aren't really any competitors that offer all the same features as CrashPlan. I mean, CrashPlan offered peer-to-peer backup. I back up to your computer, you back up to mine. That is also going away in 14 months. They had a lot of other features too that were really unique, and there isn't a single app or service that is a great replacement that does all those things all the same ways. So I think people feel like they were lured in to entrust their data and give money to this company only to have them say, forget about it. But I think another element of it was that it was the consumers that gave CrashPlan its big start. It only became successful in business later after it had this consumer foundation. And so I think there's a sense that they're kind of, giving up on the people that got them where they are. So those are some of the elements. I think there are a lot of people wishing that they had chosen a different partner to send people to other than Carbonite. I have sort of an additional element to my complaint, which is that people come to me all the time to ask me for advice on backup providers. I wrote a book about CrashPlan. I've written other books about backups. I've written lots of articles. I wrote a big article for The Wirecutter comparing online backup services. People trust me for my advice. And over the last few years, every time CrashPlan has done something that kind of makes me go, I wonder if that means their commitment to the consumer market may be slipping a little bit. Mm-hmm. I'd tweet at them or email somebody and they'd say, oh, no, it's fine. We're just, doing some stuff and there's nothing to worry about. We're still definitely committed to the consumer market. So then I would go and defend them to all the people saying, hey, I don't know if I can really trust them. And I'd say, no, really, you can trust them. They've assured me everything's going to be fine. And now that turns out not to be the case, I feel foolish. Mm-hmm. And I feel like people are upset with me for not taking these signs more seriously and believing what they told me. So I feel like I've got egg on my face, and that is kind of an additional grievance.
Yeah,
it's very understandable, and I feel obligated to say that I don't think anybody can hold you responsible. You did the follow up with them, and they decided to tell you what they told you, and you relied on that, and there you go. Yeah. Frederick, I want to go to you next because you are a photographer and therefore you generate a whole lot of stuff. I mean, you do other things other than photography, but at the end of the day, you have the need for a lot of backup space. What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, we've been talking about this on the show a lot over the past couple of years, and it always boils down to there's a couple levels. It boils down to trust. For people that don't have a backup strategy, part of the initial question that comes up is, well, if I put my stuff up there, can I trust that it's going to be there tomorrow? Then you overlay that with security. If I upload all my data to this provider, yes, I've read their tome of terms of service, but at the same time, we're hearing about all these incursions and hacking and, all this stuff that happens. Is my data safe up there? I'm essentially putting my entire life in the hands of this company, even if they say it's encrypted. Is it really encrypted? So there's that. Then the third level is the time that it takes it to get it up there. Like Joe was saying, it takes a while. It's an investment. It's a commitment of time that you will never get back again, putting this stuff in the cloud. So all three of those things shape up to, is this investment right for me? Should I do this when I could just go to Best Buy or Amazon and or Drobo and buy some Drobos or some external USB-C drives and plug in and just back up to multiple drives and be done with it fast? Is it worth it putting up there, considering the overhead of those three things? I don't think there's an answer to that. The answer is always, it depends. But from a photographer standpoint, having something like this happen with the CrashPlan is is what people like me try to safeguard against by using a service that you are actually shelling out money for versus, say, a Google or something like that, where they say, hey, give us all your images and we'll make sure they're great forever, until they send out that email that says, we've shifted our strategy, or we've done this. You have 24 hours to get your stuff off of our servers, right? When you pay for something, you feel like you're kind of safeguarding against that. And Joe, I guess you kind of did, right? Because they gave you the buffer, where if it was a free service, they would have said, you know what, you got a day or you got a week to get your stuff off. We're going in a different direction. Since you're paying, I don't know if it's if they're contractually obligated to give you that amount of time, or is it out of the kindness of their hearts? But at the same time, to answer your question, Chuck, for me, like there's two levels for me. There's the ideal backup strategy, and then there's the realistic backup strategy. Because like you said, people like me we're shooting 4K and 8K video. We're generating raw files. We're doing audio, Final Cut Pro. There's a mountain of data that's always being created that, depending on your internet speed, you can't keep ahead of it, right? So for me, it seems to be that the ideal flow is kind of what I call the 3-tiered structure. And Mark, you and I have talked about this over lunch, where it's what I call the liquid status of your data. It's fluid. It's the stuff that's on my desktop right now. I need to get in there because I got to edit this interview tomorrow. I need it available right now. And then there's the second stage of water, where it would be kind of slush, where I finished editing that, but I may need to access it within the next couple of weeks or so. So I need it within arm's reach. And then there's frozen, where I'm done with that completely. I don't need it again. It's taking up space on my hard drive, but I don't want to delete it. So I call that frozen. So, and the three ways to deal with that, respectively, from my standpoint, are with local storage, Drobo, or Thunderbolt drives or whatever. Then the next level up, the slush level, would be a service like what we thought we were getting with CrashPlan. And then the next level up from that would be something like, tape backup or Amazon Glacier or something like that.
Glacier is exactly the right service for something that's frozen, right?
It's frozen, right? Because it's not. You can get your stuff back, but it's not. Yeah. It's not like you could just press a button to get it back.
But the speeds are. What's the word I'm looking for? The speeds are not super
glacial.
Fast. Glacial.
Yes. Glacial.
They named it right? So yeah, so that's my perspective, Chuck. I'm not sure if there's a correct answer for this, because for me, from just looking at this as a cautionary tale, like looking at Joe as a cautionary tale, and people that are suffering from this, it makes me just want to say, you know what? I'm just going to back up here, and I'm going to make I'm going to run Carbon Copy Cloner and set in a routine and make a mirror and swap drives with my best friend across town, to make my offsite version of it. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the correct answer either, but clearly there needs to be something different than all your data are belong to us type scenario.
Yes.
So Mark, you're up next. And when you and I were conversing on Twitter about this, you had a bit of, like you always do, you have a business perspective on it as to why it was not a big surprise to you, and some of the backstory on that side, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I, like Joe, I have different thoughts about this from different points of view than I'm sure we'll get into as this show evolves. The first one is I really wish there were a way you could short or sell put options, which is kind of equivalent, on private companies, because this has been evident for years that CrashPlan was going to have to do this. In part, this is not the first time a popular Mac service has broken the hearts of its users. Does anyone remember Mosey?
Oh, yeah.
So it was out there, got popular, got acquired by EMC. They grew it and fanned it, and then they said something like, gee willikers, we're losing money on this. If you guys don't double or more the amount of money you're paying us, you have until this amount of time to get your data out of town, because we're not a charity. And there's similar obvious things going on with CrashPlan. I commend people to read Joe's article in Tidbits, because he lays out a lot of things. Some of the things I know directly I observed was years ago when I was at Drobo, sort of just a couple last months before I left in January of 2011. We're having a discussion with CrashPlan, and they were very interested. And ultimately, they never came to the table because at first they were saying they were just going to price it at whatever they were doing, $3 a month or for all you can eat, and didn't matter. And really, are you aware the average Drobo owner has whatever it was at that time, 9.5 terabytes? And oh yeah, that's fine, that's no problem. And just guys, I don't believe that. What if we have a huge number of people start to use it? Oh, if that's the case, then we'll just have to break ranks and change our pricing. Well, things I heard, after I left is that ultimately they never closed the deal because they didn't want to distort the beauty of the, you can start, for $3 a month or even lower, as Joe was saying, if you're using a family plan. And I think they committed sort of the unpardonable sin in capitalism, which is, if you're losing money or if you're doing something below cost, that does not go on forever. Yeah. So I think that's sort of one of the key takeaway lessons. Just as we saw Mozy jacked up its prices, if you look out at some of the other cloud backup companies, some of them actually price at the level of what storage really costs. And I feel for the folks at Code 42 because with their consumer-oriented service, they had sort of the double whammy of consumers have more data than businesses because, God knows we have tons of video and music and photos and everything. And we're cheapskates compared to business. So not only are we paying less, but we have more data. I know one photographer, and this data point was from last summer when he told me this, that at that time he had 47 terabytes of data on CrashPlan. Wow. And, I asked him why didn't you use Backblaze, and he said, well, the problem is with Backblaze, if it doesn't see the file after 30 days, it erases it. And he says, I have a lot of these on Drobos, and they're not online all the time, so I can't afford to lose it. And well, since then, Backblaze has introduced other data plans that can address and solve problems like this, but it really indicates that CrashPlan were offering a service below cost. They have this patina, this veneer of being nice to their customers, but sort of as Joe was alluding to, if you go and read on their site, it's no refunds, tough noogies, no refunds. But
they say it with a smile, though, right?
They say it with a smile, and they say we're here to help you. And for that, I just call bull ass BS. They just said, we can't afford to do this. We're going to have to double your price because the service isn't going away. That price point is going away. Their nonsense of, they'll magically migrate the data into a small business plan. Data is not moving. Data is on a hard drive or drive is just going to stay there. All that's moving is, a decimal point or something in the accounting system, and the entitlement that lets okay, is Joe or Frederick good to upload data, or are they in bad standing and we need to delete their data? Yeah. So I think that's what's going on. There are other crumbs along the way. Of a couple of years ago, they used to have their JavaScript client, and a lot of people ported that onto things like Synology or Drobo or QNAP, and then 15 months ago, or plus or minus, they discontinued that. You would only be on an Intel platform, so they were slowly taking steps to shed the load, and this is just the last straw.
So Mark, I just want to follow up on the, as you say, there is a point of view from which they only shifted the decimal point. They're saying, well, yes, you can keep your data on the same hard drives. We're going to charge you twice as much ish, How do you think, or how does anybody here think the news would have been received differently if the press release we're discontinuing CrashPlan for home, but rather, sorry, we're doubling the price of CrashPlan for home. Everything else stays the same. Mm-hmm. You can still do local backups. You can still do peer-to-peer. Nothing else changes except literally we're just doubling our price. Yeah. Yeah. In my opinion, a lot of people would have been unhappy about that, but they would have been much less unhappy, even though in a manner of speaking, it's sort of the same thing behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Semantics,
The way this was phrased sort of feels like, we don't care about you anymore.
Yeah, we've moved on.
This is sort of, it seems to me, this is your proverbial accountants or attorneys messaging this action, whereas they should have said, sorry, this has been a very successful service. We love all of our customers. Unfortunately, we can't provide this level of service at this price. So we have one of two options. We'll gladly continue it at these new adjusted rates, or if not, we know that migration is difficult and we're giving everybody whatever it is, a 14-month, 15-month migration period. But for whatever reason, they didn't do that.
I think we can. I think it's easy for us to armchair quarterback, after the fact, after they do this. But, playing devil's advocate for CrashPlan, I would say that, what if the decision was either we make this change or we go away because data is becoming so cheap and, we're being gnawed at on all ends, both on the messaging side and on the services side by Google and, Apple with their drive in the cloud, and people are getting confused and we're losing the consumers. So if we don't put a tourniquet on this right now, we're going to be hurting, and the company may ultimately suffer worse than if we make this move. So from a business standpoint, if the question is do this or die, then I would, running the company, I would happily put up with a lot of disgruntled customers. To Joe's point, though, why not just message it differently to say that, to let me know you've been selling me this siren song of your data is safe with us forever, whether it's in the fine print or not, but your data is safe with us. You can trust us. We're your CrashPlan. So, and instead of saying, one day, what, all that stuff we said, no, we didn't really mean it. We're going to go focus on these guys now. Now you don't trust anybody. I wouldn't, any of these cloud services could do something similar. They're all essentially the same. They all have a profit motive. So, they're going to make business decisions. So I would worry from a higher level about the structure of the business model, and is that tenable into 2020, 2025? Is that a business model that can be sustained, or should we be thinking of something more homebrew, that we're not reliant on third-party decisions being made in a boardroom that are going to impact the shots of my daughter's first steps, right?
So the challenge on that, Frederick, is everyone always talks about 3-2-1 backup, right? Mm-hmm. And the last one is offsite and old style. I'm sure photographers I know, where they would buy drives in threes. They'd make 3 copies. They put one in their bank vault and they'd send one to their parents or something. Yeah. So, but that was very labor intensive and very hit and miss. Oh, I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to do it this week because we have the Labor Day barbecue or something.
The human variable.
So, you have the human variable. So I think that was sort of the siren song of, especially as people got enough broadband bandwidth that they could upload it. Yes, it would take months and months on end, but they could upload it. I think made people very, very happy. The unfortunate point is, as an industry, is they were misleading their users, and when they say things like unlimited or infinite or things, right away you should be calling BS on it.
Yep.
Because stuff has real cost, and we all know, that if it's free, people will take advantage of it, right? Mm-hmm. So unlimited, why did this photographer put 47 terabytes of data up there?
Yeah.
Because he could.
And that is, in my way of thinking, that would have been yet another way CrashPlan could have addressed the problem. If they say, well, the problem is that people are storing 47 terabytes of data, so we are switching from an unlimited plan to a plan that, we're going to limit you to, maybe it's a big number, maybe it's 5 terabytes or, like a meaningful number, but But they could say either, it's the same price, but there's now a limit, or there's no limit, but it's a higher price. Mm-hmm. And, any of those decisions would certainly upset some people without any question. And yet I feel like either one of those approaches would have been so much kinder to the people who have, invested so much in CrashPlan over so many years than the way they went about it.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to get in on this because okay, so first of all, I guess under the heading of full disclosure, I'm running Backblaze as my primary backup service. I also have CrashPlan, and we have CrashPlan at places where I wear other hats. So let's look at what CrashPlan has done right here. Okay. Number one, they have not shut down. To Frederick's point, mm-hmm. It'll cost you more, but you are not faced with losing anything. You're just going to have to pay more. Mm-hmm. Number two, a mistake they made was that unlimited thing. Mm-hmm. All right, but the other thing too that unfortunately I think we may all be overlooking is that 47 gigs worth of stuff. And Frederick, I love your analogy. They were being relied on for frozen mm-hmm. data as opposed to backup data. Yeah. I really applaud CrashPlan's thing because, Backblazes, because they say 30 days. If it's connected, great. If we see it connected, great. It'll go for another 30 days. If not, we limit it. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a limited, unlimited plan, if that makes sense, or it's sort of fluid, unlimited plan. Mm-hmm. Backblaze is, screwing this up. CrashPlan is giving you 14 months. Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing I wish they would do during that 14 months is they would say, okay, if you want to take your data out, this is how you're going to do it. And we'll help you do it. You either ship us hard drives, or we'll give you these really, 75 zipped files with all your stuff on it, and you download it and undo it. I haven't seen anything in that fashion. Mm-hmm. So, and this is early. I mean, what is this? I guess we are only 5 days into this as we record this. So, there's some things they could do that I think would help a lot. And all your points about the messaging, there's no question. But I guess one big thing I want to say just in sort of defense of CrashPlan is they have given you a path. It's going to cost you more. And we all have gotten to this point where we feel entitled that, okay, now this is what we've been paying and this is what we've been getting, and we don't want to double our cost. Mm-hmm. Tell you what, if I had been relying on that exclusively, I'd be happy to pay 5 times that to make sure my data is safe where I can get to it. It may take some time.
It still smells a little like extortion, though. It just feels like, hey, we know we said it was going to be $5, but if you want your data, I'm feeling like it's going to be $10 now. It feels a little dirty.
It'll be awful horrible if an accident happened to some of those data.
Pay us our protection money, our data protection money.
We know how to protect against that.
Yeah, but again, at the same time, we have seen services that went out of business, in very short order, and you did not have a chance to get your data off. Yeah. So. I want to give the devil their due, and that's not just that was a bad phrase because it's just they made a business decision. Just what I said before, Joe. You can't be held accountable for somebody else's business decision. Yeah, it would have been nice if their messaging had been a little bit more clear, especially when specific inquiries were made.
I think that's a question for Kibitz.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
I think that's maybe what we're kibitzing about because they have acted very responsibly. It's just that I think their messaging is a little bit off, and that's what's creating a lot of this uproar. So I think that's maybe a self-inflicted wound that they could have avoided. And prices went up. Oh well, that was such a great deal I had for all those years, and I'll continue to use it. People will get over it, but. It's that coupled with, the seeming, unfeeling big company, plus the prospect of how do I move it over? And okay, I can go to, Carbonite, who they're recommending, but it's not clear exactly why can't we just do a CrashPlan to Carbonite transfer? Why do I have to do it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's API.
Well, Art, since you brought up Carbonite, one of the VPs from Code 42 actually called me the day before this announcement went out to tell me what was happening. He sent me the press release, and then immediately after called me. I was still reading the press release, the preview version of it, when he called. And so I asked him, okay, so what are the deals with this Carbonite thing? And he said, well, it's 50% off a subscription to Carbonite and then 20% off additional storage. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I guess 50% off is okay. And I looked at the Carbonite site, and their charges for a single person to back up data for a year was somewhere in the vicinity of what CrashPlan charged. So I thought, well, okay, 50% discount on that is okay. But then I actually, because people started telling me about this, I actually followed the link in the email that CrashPlan sent me. And it turns out that they're not offering you 50% on an ordinary consumer plan at Carbonite. They're offering you 50% off the Carbonite business plan. It's called Carbonite Core. And Carbonite Core normally costs $270 a year, and it only gives you 250 gigabytes of storage. So it's not even so they're saying you can either switch to our business plan, which is going to cost you twice as much, or it's okay if you don't want to be with us anymore. That's fine. Go to Carbonite, use their business plan, which is going to cost you much more than twice as much. Yeah. There is not an offer to switch to Carbonite's consumer plan. Now, I have other beefs with Carbonite. That's another whole issue. But just that move to say the only offer we're giving you with them is for their insanely, out of, their business plan, which is not even in the same ballpark cost-wise, just seems really tone deaf to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Carbonite, is a company that they've been public about 8 years or so, except for maybe a couple of quarters. They've never made money. They were able to make money. They just stopped all their, consumer acquisition, because it used to be we'd hear them on podcasts all the time, then nothing. They made a little bit of money, and now they're back again. And if you look at your financials, which I did, because Google Financials is making really great to take a peek at yearly and income and cash flow and balance sheet information. Earlier this year, they raised about $125 million in debt. So if you look and you see the sort of the retained earnings line, it's just every year, it's just negative. So, they're a public company. You can short them if you want to, but they're in a situation where also they look like they have a bad business model, and you
really want to trust your data to them.
Right. Again, I think ultimately this is all about just hedging risks and longevity. And with private companies, we've seen Mozy, we've seen Carbonite, CrashPlan. With some of the other options out there, I think some of them are appropriately priced. I put together a little bit of table here, and sort of the iCloud is 2 terabytes is $9.99 a month. That's not bad. For Google, 1 terabyte is $19.99 a month. So advantage Apple on that. Similarly, the Amazon Cloud Drive, 1 terabyte is $60 a year. So what's that? That's $5 a month. So, and I think that scales linearly at that rate. So that would be like $10 a month versus. So that would be sort of on par with what Apple is doing. So some of these are other alternatives. Again, if people want to start from scratch and re-upload their data for the next N weeks or months. And
I wonder about this. Like, Joe, I wanted to ask you this question if I could, because I think about it from a consumer standpoint, and not for I think the majority of us on this call, and probably the listeners, are advanced more so than your average consumer that's not thinking about this. But I'm thinking what's the holy grail for data storage? Could the Occam's razor of this just be as simple as saying of Apple, when they open up one of their new data centers, adding an unlimited plan or something like that, and then you just pay a little bit extra a month and everything just happens and it's all tied into Time Machine? Is that the holy grail for this?
I have been asked this in the last couple of days. People have said, well, why doesn't Apple just, offer cloud storage for Time Machine as part of iCloud? And I mean, they already do offer cloud storage for iOS devices, for for backing up iOS devices, not for Macs. I've made sort of a career out of evaluating and testing online backup services, plus like just regular local backup apps. And I've written a lot about iCloud, and I've written about Dropbox, and I've watched all these numbers go up and down. And I've watched what Apple has done with storage. And on the one hand, I think, well, surely the technology can't be that hard. And also, surely if anybody can pull this off, both logistically and financially, it's Apple. And yet, having said that, I can't see it. I can't see Apple doing that.
They don't have the best track record in data storage, right?
Well, no, they don't. And one of the things that immediately worries me about Apple trying to put Time Machine in the cloud, because they would not be the first. Do you remember Dolly Drive?
Oh yeah.
Dolly Drive started out as cloud storage for Time Machine backups. That eventually stopped working well, and so they just they still do backups, but it's not based on Time Machine anymore. But one of the problems with Time Machine is that every time you back up a file, you back up the whole file. They don't do, sort of block level differential.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're talking about cloud storage, you have to be able to do that, or you're just going to blow out everybody's bandwidth, not to mention blowing out the storage requirements on the other end. So they would have to solve that, among other things, first. And they could, but I've seen what Apple has been doing with their iCloud pricing. They're still only giving away 5 gigabytes for free, even though that won't let you back up your entire iPhone. Yeah. So Apple, even though they've increased their limits and they kept the prices the same, I still look at that and go, I think Apple's smart enough to realize that Mac users have ton of data to back up, and I think Apple wouldn't make the mistake of undercharging for it. I think they would charge what it actually costs, and at this point I still think that number would be too high. So although I would love to see it, I'd be very happy if Apple could pull off something like that. At this point in time, I'm not seeing it. It seems highly unlikely to me.
Yeah. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. So I think the wild card here, Joe, is with the new APFS, they may be in a position where they are much better able. I mean, one of the things that it offers is snapshots, so that you can upload it once and then you just upload the deltas. So you have a big, pick a number, 150 megabyte keynote file. You go in and you change the dates or the customer name you're presenting it to. Boom, you snapshot it, and that's one block, 4096 bytes. Blammo, that can go up instantaneously. So I think now, unlike Time Machine, which was really a hack to try to, get better backup solutions available for Mac users, I think now they have a proper technology foundation that they could do that. They've been experimenting this for a couple of years. What was it? I think in 2011, 2012, they started coming out that within their iWork suites, they would have, incremental revision, so that every time you save something, you could go back into it and you could have a little bit of limited capability that you could dial back in time. So they've been experimenting with this. Longer term, I would be positive on Apple doing it, and the reason is this is other themes I've discussed on other MacJuries with Chuck and other folks, talking about some of the iPhone competitiveness. And I think Apple needs to do it overall to make their environment incrementally more attractive to pull people over.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're very careful on how they roll out solutions because they have such an immense customer base. But will they do it? I don't know. But I think now the chances are great because they have a good technology platform. And as a competitive, long-term competitive issue, they want to pull people in. And once they're there and the data's there, you talk about stickiness. So,
well, Mark, you make an excellent point talking about APFS. That is going to be a game changer. I think, you know, we're going to have a transitional period.
Yes.
To where enough people are using it and the bugs have been ironed out and so forth, where that becomes viable. I mean, even in the high Sierra betas that I've used so far, there are aspects of APFS that are not accessible to the end user. Right. So that will happen over time, and I think that could definitely change the story. Just based on today's time machine, let's say. I think we have some distance to go yet, but it is cause for hope.
Yeah, let's reconvene 3 years from today and revisit this, because I think it's something on that magnitude. It's not 3 months or 3 quarters. It's going to be a long-term transition.
With this new file system and the onslaught of iOS 11 and the new iPhone, presumably, and all these wonderful new features that these things are getting, and moving the iPad closer to being a desktop or a viable desktop or laptop replacement machine, I was just thinking about this. Could CrashPlan's move be preemptive because they see the shrinking desktop and laptop market? Most millennials I know, many of them, if not most of them, don't even own what I call a proper computer. It's the phone or a tablet. So are they maybe looking forward and looking at their charts and graphs and saying, hey, here's the point where it crosses, and let's get ahead of this thing and skate to where the puck is going to be? And and in this consumer business right now, because it's going away anyway. I don't know. It just seems like that might be a viable tea leaf reading.
Have any of you considered that Apple already has a backup service in the cloud?
Mm-mm.
It's that little option that says store your documents folder in iCloud.
Yeah, it's scary.
It's scary, but and maybe with APFS it'll get better, but in a sense you've already got that. I mean, you've got an option there, and I too would be a little hesitant for lots of reasons, not the least of which is the bandwidth costs of shuffling my files up and down all the time. Yeah. But it is there.
Yeah,
it is there. It's built into the OS.
It is. One of the things that has been very much discussed in the last week, particularly with regard to Backblaze, because I'm recommending Backblaze, and Glenn Fleischman is recommending Backblaze, and John Gruber is recommending Backblaze, and Chuck Joyner is recommending Backblaze. Everybody's saying, yeah, but Backblaze will only store deleted files and older versions for up to 30 days, whereas CrashPlan would store them indefinitely. Dropbox is the same way. You can pay Dropbox an extra like $25 a year to get a year's worth of storage. Apple is the same way. You get 30 days worth of revisions, but after that, older stuff and deleted stuff is gone. And even then, it's kind of awkward to retrieve old versions. It's not like you would do with Time Machine. It's kind of an involved process going to the iCloud website. So I am. People have said to me, well, I already use Dropbox and Dropbox has versioning, so why do I need backups on top of that? And one of the things I go back to is, well, yeah, but have you ever needed to get a file that was deleted more than 30 days ago? Because I know I have. Mm-hmm. And that's true of Backblaze, but my sort of what I'm coming around to now is saying, well, yes, you do have to solve that problem. You solve that problem with local backups, and that's one part of the mix, and cloud backups are another part of the mix. You can't really depend on the cloud to solve all your problems. So, I mean, it's true that in a sense, Apple does kind of solve a part of this problem for two folders. Well, yeah, I mean, stuff you manually put in iCloud Drive too. But I think what's really happening is we all have to start thinking about data storage in a different way. We can no longer think, well, everything is just there forever in the cloud and it's going to be fine. I think we have to sort of divide our thinking between there's stuff that, yeah, okay, there's a little bit of a buffer there in case I really screw up. And that, Dropbox can do some of that and iCloud can do some of that. But then backups are a different thing. Backups are like, it's never going to go away until I tell it to go away. And for that, you're either going to have to use your own storage devices locally or storage space that you pay for. You can buy space from Amazon or buy space from Google or buy space from, Backblaze or whatever, and you're just paying by the gigabyte. And then you use an app like Arc or, Cloudberry Backup or Retrospect or ChronoSync. Like there's a whole bunch of apps.
Some of the oldies
that can use cloud storage as destination. But then you're sort of divorcing the two. You're saying, hey, if Google stops offering cloud storage, it's okay. I can use the same app. I'll just switch my stuff over to Amazon. And if this app that I've been using for cloud storage stops working, it's okay. My data is still safe in the cloud, and I'll switch to a different app. So it's a different, more complicated model to get used to, but I think that might be where we have to start heading.
Yeah. And it sounds like there's an opportunity there, Joe, for software vendors or software writers to create utilities that make utilizing some of those services a lot easier. But I'm not sure how we all recover some of the trust that we're losing here in this situation.
Well, you can't get over it. We just need forward.
I think you can get over it, Mark. I mean, I think but you have to kind of understand the rules of the game, which is something that a lot of consumers, and that's a whole other point I want to make, but a lot of consumers don't want to take the time to understand.
Right.
And CrashPlan was like unlimited forever, versioning, and you just said great and just started throwing things at it.
And that's why it's having such a tumultuous riot in the blogosphere and social media sphere over their action. It was totally off brand for them to do something like this.
Yeah, I had a representative of Backblaze on the show a couple shows ago, and they talked about their B2 storage, which is their archive storage. They're very upfront about the 30-day thing and how it worked, and he had no problem explaining it or making it very easily understandable. And I think that's one of the keys is I strongly dislike the word transparency because I think it's overused right now. But when it comes to this kind of thing, you darn well better be transparent about what it is you're storing and what it is you're deleting from people's drives or from people's storage. Yeah. Because at one other point though that I wanted to go back and Backblaze kind of takes this philosophy. They don't have a business product. They don't have a consumer product. They have a backup service. There's no differentiation, and I really like that. And somebody made sort of that point earlier. I'm not sure if it was Joe or Frederick that the consumer product is going away. It would have been much nicer if they had just said, "Hey, we're transitioning to one line, and here's what it's going to cost," and go from there.
Yeah.
So there is this whole issue about data storage, and this is, I think, another sort of problem that's transferring from enterprises and companies to individuals. Where companies have known for a long time that you have sort of locality of with Frederick, liquid, slushy, and frozen. That data once you're done with the project, once you're done with that presentation, you're not going to use it. So, in a lot of concepts in some of the high-end enterprise storage, they will move things between, they call them tiers, based on how recently accessed something was. Based on the premise that if you haven't used it for 30 days, you're very low probability that you're going to use it. And what you're starting to see is a little bit of services and devices where they're starting to talk about, maybe this device or this appliance is sort of like a cloud cache where we'll store a little bit here and have an unlimited amount, because we back end by Azure or Google or Amazon, and locally we'll have a little thumbnail image or whatever the metadata is, so that when you need that file, we'll go and grab it for you. So it looks like you have all your data, but it's up in the cloud. Sort of, some people talk about this as sort of thinly provisioned file systems or virtual file systems. So something like that is technology that's coming into play. There's certainly no shortage of entrants who are trying to duke it out in the small business and enterprise market. No one really that I've seen in the consumer space, although there are some things that some of the languages sort of overlap, whether you're an individual, i.e., say maybe like Frederick, a photographer, where you're a person, but you're making money and you're generating enormous amounts of data. So these are things that are coming. And I really think, I wholeheartedly agree with, what Joe was saying, because one of the things I've had to tell people is if you have data, it's not a set it and forget it one-time thing. It's an ongoing process that you have to think about upgrading your hard drives or upgrading your storage system. For most people, it's maybe has been a natural thing. They go from a 500 gig to a terabyte to maybe a 2 terabyte to a 3 or 4. So they're copying and upgrading in place. But if people have more than that, or they're trying to add in the dimension, everyone says, oh, I got to do 3-2-1. So what am I doing? How am I doing it? That starts to introduce additional complexity. Yeah. And the downside is that all these services out there, we're just scratching the surface, right? Talking about gigabytes and dollars. There's all sorts of other things in terms of encryption and who owns the key and how do you change the key that are additional requirements that some of the more advanced or maybe security conscious individuals and buyers are looking for.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way to, and Joe, maybe this is a question for you. I was reading that there is a way through APIs for these services online, whether it be CrashPlan or Backblaze or et cetera, to interconnect with each other so that, I know it's not the law right now, but maybe there should be some sort of requirement that if this company promises to safeguard your data, should they one day decide to go away, they provide an easy path for you to migrate to another service so that you don't have to, you got kicked out of your apartment. You don't have to figure and scramble to get movers and all this stuff. You can just transfer directly from cloud to cloud. Is there a way to do that? Is that viable, do you think?
Well, I don't want to say that anything is ever impossible because ultimately we're just talking about bits. Yeah. But it is complicated because, CrashPlan uses one method of encryption. Backblaze uses a different method of encryption. CrashPlan uses one method of delta updates, for all the individual pieces of files where just a little thing has changed, not the whole file. And Backblaze uses a different thing. So it's not complicated to just say, oh, we're going to send this 2 terabytes of data from this data center to a different hard drive in a different data center. That part isn't particularly hard, but keeping all the little bits and pieces in a retrievable form while not compromising security is a significant technical challenge. And again, I would stop short of saying impossible, but it's not as simple as it may appear.
Well, that's what the nerds get paid the big bucks for, right? So to figure that out. As a consumer, I want to be able, if this happens, the email that you got from CrashPlan, I wish it would have said something like, all this yada, 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 business tier, yada, yada. Then at the bottom, but if you want to transfer your data, select one of these providers that we've done a deal with and will cost you the same amount. Click here and your data will be transferred in 2 weeks max. That I know it's, I'm oversimplifying it, but from a consumer standpoint, that's what the consumer experience that I would feel my trust was not compromised if they did something like that versus just, hey, clean out your desk, Joe. It's done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been doing some consulting work with a startup company here, and I have a couple feet from me, their appliance, and how to describe it. Sort of locally, it looks like a NAS box. You have remote access to it, although that's a little more complicated, not ready for consumer prime time yet. And it has a really interesting option that it will also back itself up to a cloud. So you can select your cloud provider, or more interestingly, if you decide, I don't really like any of them, or I'm super paranoid that if one of those systems get hacked, I don't want my data exposed. Mm-hmm. Basically, what you can do is you can sort of think about it. You can stripe the data, so you could tell it, put 50% in Amazon and 50% in Google, or stripe it in thirds, a third Azure, a third Amazon, a third Google, et cetera, so that if those systems get hacked, all they see is random noise. So it's only maintaining the integrity at your local device. So unfortunately, this company hasn't launched yet, but if any listeners are interested, just contact me, and we can find a way to pursue it.
And I will say too, there's another option that we could all consider. I mean, I could easily clear space on these shelves here, and if people want to just mail me hard drives, I will store them right here for, let's say, pennies a month, and I could send you pictures of them from time to time, so you can visit them virtually.
Yeah.
And if what you're looking for is cold storage of your data, this shelf right here. You wouldn't believe how much dust accumulates on this crap.
Mark, to your client's point, or to your client, communicate to them, and maybe it's already built in. Don't tell me if we shouldn't know. But one of the options here, we're all talking about being very reliant on one service. Maybe we should have all had 2 clients running.
Yeah.
3 clients. If you're really that worried about it, if you really are that paranoid, and yes, I realize that you could say, well, then I'll just choose one and I'll pay a higher tier. But maybe there is something to be said, not for necessarily for striping, but
Yes, you could. If you really wanted to go the other direction, you could say, I want to back up to Amazon and Google and Azure and other providers as well. Yeah. I mean, at that point, yes, the storage bills will rack up, but as a user, you're in control of how much or how little protection you have for your data.
Yeah, and I guess it all comes down to that, is just how paranoid are you? Yeah. Gentlemen, we're pretty much out of time, but I really appreciate you all showing up and doing this, and dealing with the inevitable Skype problems that seem to be becoming more and more frequent. Yeah. But I do want to go around the room and let folks know where they can find you when you're not here serving on the MacJury. Joe, I think a lot of the viewers know where they can find you, but I'll let you, list it all off anyway.
Yes. It's always weird to me when somebody ats me on Twitter and is like, well, what's your email address? I'm like, really? Come on. Have you ever used Google? I'm pretty easy to find. But anyway, you can go to takecontrolbooks.com to see books that I've written, books that a lot of other people have written, and that's kind of where I'm mainly putting my attention these days.
Great. Thanks for being here, Joe. Appreciate it. Love the hair. Frederick, how about you?
People can find me at thisweekinphoto.com. That's my home on the internet and where we host all of our photography podcasts.
Great. Looking forward to getting back into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Mr. Fuccio.
So your Skype is breaking out. I think you asked how people can reach me. So
yes, sir.
2 ways. On Twitter, I'm at Mark Fuccio, MarkFuccio, all lowercase, all spelled as one word. Or for professionally, people can reach out to me via LinkedIn.
Great. Guys, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll talk to you all again here, if not in this configuration, at least in some configuration. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. I'm not sure we reached any conclusions, but we wanted to give you some information, wanted you to make you think a little bit about your needs and what you need to do to keep your data safe. So please pay some attention to this. Look at Backblaze. If CrashPlan suits you, great. You'll be paying a little more, but your data is still safe. There's some other options out there. Go check those out as well. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.